this would be the video version of my blog series, well, two of my blog series actually. The first one being what that movie inspired me to do from my blog Coffee and Casseroles, which I've been doing the last couple of years since the beginning of the blog for anybody who's been reading that one. In the beginning, it started off as anything and everything that a movie or TV show inspired me to do, from picking up a new language to learning a new hobby to learning a new recipe. After a while, it became all about the food, but in a good way. And the other series, actually, I started hosting on my blog in 2016 an all-vampire book and movie club called Nightbleeds, where we would take we would take a combo, a book and a movie, and we would compare the story versions, or we'd take two separate ones and see where the common thread was that linked them together. October of 2016, my all-vampire book and movie club, Nightbleeds, paired up as a combo the book Salem's Lot with the movie Fright, the original 1985 film. So I was inspired to make an Apple Brown Betty because the lead character of Jerry Dandridge, he's eating apples through most of the movie. And from what I understand, the actor Chris Sarandon, it was his idea to add this little character trait because he wanted to connect the idea that Jerry was part fruit bat. So what you're going to need for this recipe are anywhere from 3 to 6 apples sliced, depending on how large the apples are. 2 tablespoons of white sugar, 2 tablespoons of cinnamon. I like a little pinch of nutmeg in mine. A half a cup of flour, 2/3 cup of brown sugar, and 1/4 cup of butter. The crumble, the topping first. So I have my butter here, it's softened, and to the butter I am going to add my half a cup of flour and my 2/3 cup of brown sugar. So one of the reasons that we decided to do this particular combo was because both stories, both Salem's Lot, the book, and Fright Night, the original movie, is about a guy who realizes a vampire moved in next door and nobody believes him. The other reason was I just could not seem to get my hands on a copy of any of the movie versions of Salem's Lot. It was just a little difficult. So I'm just mixing this by hand here till we get a grainy texture. For anybody who has not seen the movie Fright Night, it's about 3 teenagers who discover that there is a vampire living next door. And they have to, nobody believes them, but they have to pretty much save the town. And they do this by getting the help of their favorite horror host. And this was during the mid-80s, so the late night horror host was still a huge thing. Things don't quite go as planned for our heroes. They end up spending half the movie running for their lives. One of the things I loved about the movie Fright Night was that it did kind of bridge the gap between the way vampire movies were, or horror movies in general, were going on with what they became. It literally, between the characters, managed to express as a metaphor itself the way the vampire genre had evolved. The character of Mr. Peter Vincent, the fearless vampire killer and horror host, obviously, he represents literally the way the old Hammer films used to be done, where you would have a vampire come in to a village and you'd have to call in the expert, usually played by Peter Cushing, who would kill the vampire in the traditional way. His battle is mostly fought between, himself, actually, his own belief. He represents not just the old version of how the horror film, the vampire genre had been running, but he also represents the need for belief. Because the character is a horror host, he's kind of gotten to the point where everything is materialistic and he doesn't believe in anything anymore. So his battle is between his own self-belief and the Renfield character, which is the character of Evil Ed. So between the character of Peter Vincent and the sidekick, best friend, Evil Ed, you have the traditional elements from the older vampire movies. This is one of the first movies that introduced the idea of the vampire looking for not just another virginal girl, but the idea that the character of Amy was a reincarnation of his lost love. The vampires went from being like Christopher Lee's style, very evil, we're going to take your soul, to what Jerry Dandridge brought in, which was a very seductive, very sleek, very, I keep bringing up the word modern, take on things, which of course is how all the vampire movies would progress there forward. Alright, so now here are the apples. I pre-cut them, and unfortunately I forgot to put lemon juice on them, so they've already started to oxidize a little bit here. So to the apples, I am going to add first my 2 tablespoons of sugar, and then my 2 tablespoons of cinnamon, and my pinch of nutmeg. And to that now, we're going to add the crumble. This was also one of the last times we really saw a Renfield character being used. Modern vampire films kind of got rid of the idea of needing a daytime protector type of character. And we see 2 Renfields, technically, because there is the character, I want to say Stark, I might be wrong, Dandridge's live-in roommate, his caretaker, his a Renfield character, and then of course Evil Ed gets turned into a Renfield as well. This movie spawned 1 sequel and 2 remakes. I found some of the main themes in this movie to be obsession, addiction, belief, loyalty. Alright, so this now goes into the oven at 350 for 45 minutes. So I'm going to go do that and I'll be back in a bit. And there you go, one of the simplest recipes you could ever come up with. And it just proves that the apple gimmick in a vampire movie was done long before Twilight ever came around. We're talking 30 years before. So I'm going to go have some of this with a cup of coffee. Here's the front of this one, and here's the back of it. Thanks for watching. I hope you like this this first round. So you got to see one of the recipes that I was inspired to do by this movie, and one of the hobbies that I was inspired to do by this movie, and with a little bit of fashion sense thrown in. So until next time, creeping screams.